The Duggar family built an entire multi-million-dollar television empire on one single, unbreakable foundation: the covenant marriage. In the Institute in Basic Life Principles, divorce is not just a sin, it is an unforgivable betrayal of God and family. You stay, you pray, and you obey, no matter how toxic the situation gets. We saw it with Anna Duggar, who stood by her man through the most horrific scandals imaginable. But today, that foundation hasn't just cracked, it has completely shattered. In a twist of irony so shocking that no one saw it coming, Jim Bob's own sister, Aunt Deanna Duggar, has reportedly gone rogue. Insider reports claim she has run straight to the press, publicly demanding that Kendra Caldwell divorce Joseph Duggar. The ultimate Duggar cardinal rule has been broken, and the call is coming from inside the house. If you are as utterly speechless as we are about this massive Duggar family meltdown, you need to hit that like button right now. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on all notifications because we are dropping exclusive, deep dive updates on this situation every single day, and you do not want to miss a single second of this fallout. To truly understand the magnitude of what is happening right now, we have to look back at the golden era of the Duggar family, a time built entirely on a false, meticulously crafted image. When the first massive scandal broke years ago involving the eldest son, the family's response was a masterclass in toxic PR manipulation. Jim Bob and Michelle immediately circled the wagons. They went on national television and preached a highly sanitized narrative of forgiveness, youthful indiscretions, and unshakable family unity. They created an impenetrable fortress of toxic loyalty. To the outside world, and especially to their deeply religious fan base, they sold the illusion that their rigid faith could overcome any earthly failing. The Duggar PR machine was relentless and terrifyingly effective. If you were inside the family, the rules were clear. You smiled for the cameras, you read your Bible, and you swept the darkest, dirtiest secrets right under the sprawling living room rug of the big house. Loyalty to Jim Bob and the brand was placed above the safety, autonomy, and well-being of the children. It was a golden era of reality television deception, and for a long time, it actually worked. The show continued, the money flowed in, and the harsh IBLP teachings were validated on a global scale. They managed to convince millions of viewers that their strict, ultra-conservative, sheltered lifestyle was the ultimate shield against the evils of the modern world. But that shield was nothing more than smoke and mirrors, and the rot was already festering deep beneath the floorboards. The fortress, however, did not collapse overnight. The first real cracks in the Duggar Foundation began to show over the last few years, when the older sisters finally started to wake up from decades of heavy indoctrination. We watched in real time as Jill Dillard and eventually Joanna began pulling away from the suffocating grip of the IBLP teachings. Jill was the ultimate pioneer in this family. She took the unimaginable risk of stepping out into the secular world, seeking actual licensed therapy, and ultimately writing a bombshell tell-all book that exposed the deep financial and emotional abuse orchestrated by her own father. Jill set boundaries that were completely unheard of in the Duggar universe. She refused to film, she demanded the money she was owed, and she publicly denounced the cult-like teachings of Bill Gothard. Joanna, who was once considered a staunch, unquestioning defender of the family line, slowly began to show signs of distancing herself as well. She started prioritizing her own nuclear family over the endless, exhausting demands of the big house, pulling her children out of the immediate Duggar spotlight. These were not just petty family squabbles. These were monumental shifts in power. The fortress was already compromised. Jim Bob was rapidly losing his grip on his daughters, the very same daughters whose trauma he had previously exploited to save his television show and his bank account. The facade of the perfectly obedient, submissive Duggar family was crumbling in the public eye. People were finally beginning to see that the shiny, happy people on their screens were actually deeply traumatized survivors, desperately trying to navigate a reality they were never prepared for. But even with Jill, Ginger, and Joanna slowly breaking rank, the core boys of the family were largely thought to be firmly under Jim Bob's thumb. The patriarchal structure of the cult dictates that the men hold the power, and as long as the sons remained loyal, Jim Bob's empire could survive. Joseph, in particular, was viewed as the quintessential good soldier. He was quiet, incredibly compliant, and perfectly moldable. He never rocked the boat. He followed every single step of the courtship rules to the letter and married Kendra Caldwell, the endlessly giggling, hyper-obedient daughter of a prominent local pastor. Together, they created what looked like the absolute perfect next-generation IBLP poster couple. They started having children immediately. They lived on Duggar property, and they presented an image of flawless, unquestioning submission to the family's core values. Joseph was the son who was supposed to prove that the system worked. He was the counter-narrative to his older brother's catastrophic failures. But then came the catalyst. The single devastating action that sparked what many are calling the final downfall of the Duggar dynasty. According to shocking insider reports and exclusive theories currently tearing through the Duggar watchdog community, Joseph Duggar has found himself at the center of a severe legal and moral catastrophe. Rumors of a sudden, quiet arrest have shattered the Duggar narrative completely. For years, the family's ultimate defense mechanism was to paint their eldest son's horrific crimes as a one-off. He was the anomaly, the singular bad apple in an otherwise pristine, God-fearing barrel. Jim Bob and Michelle staked whatever remaining reputation they had on the premise that their parenting was perfect, their religion was pure, and the devil simply managed to tempt one of their flock. But these new, terrifying insider reports surrounding Joseph completely destroy that defense. If Joseph, the quiet one, the rule follower, the golden boy of the IBLP, is harboring dark, indefensible secrets that have led to legal intervention, then the realization hits the family and the public with the force of a freight train. The rot is not an anomaly. The rot is entirely systemic. This realization is sending shockwaves through Tontitown because it proves that the environment Jim Bob created wasn't a safe haven from the world. It was a breeding ground for entitlement, hidden abuses, and massive cover-ups. The implications of Joseph allegedly being detained or facing severe legal scrutiny are earth-shattering for the Duggar empire. It validates every single fear and accusation hurled at the IBLP by survivors and critics for decades. It suggests that the extreme suppression of natural human development, combined with absolute patriarchal power and zero accountability, creates monsters disguised as men of God. And this time, there is no TLC PR team to spin the narrative. There is no highly paid crisis management firm ready to put Michelle on a morning talk show to cry and quote scripture. There is only raw, unfiltered panic behind the gates of the Duggar compound. Let's look at the psychology of what is happening behind the scenes with Kendra right now. Kendra Caldwell was raised in an environment just as strict, if not stricter, than the Duggars. Her father, Pastor Paul Caldwell, was a close ally of Jim Bob, and Kendra was groomed from the moment she was born to be a subservient, joyfully available wife. She was systematically denied the tools to question male authority, let alone possess the emotional or financial independence to leave a marriage. The concept of divorce doesn't just go against her religion, it literally does not exist in her practical vocabulary. So, for her to be thrust into the center of this swirling vortex of scandal surrounding Joseph is unimaginable. Theories and insider leaks suggest she is completely paralyzed by fear, trauma, and confusion. She is trapped in a waking nightmare, caught between the man she was commanded by God to marry and the horrific reality of these new, devastating allegations. Reports indicate that the Caldwells and the Duggars are utilizing their standard playbook, allegedly pressuring Kendra to stay completely silent, to pray harder, to fast for her husband's sins, and to submit to his spiritual leadership, no matter what he has allegedly done. This is the exact same psychological prison they built for Deanna Duggar. It is a system specifically designed to keep women trapped, terrified, and compliant in the name of religious duty. But this is where the story takes a turn that no one could have ever predicted. This is where the absolute hubris of Jim Bob Duggar meets a reckoning he cannot control. Jim Bob arrogantly believed that his silence would starve the media. He thought that if he just locked down the compound, confiscated phones, and enforced strict gag orders on the family, this new crisis would simply blow over. According to exclusive theories, Joseph himself allegedly believed that sitting in a Washington County cell, loudly reading his Bible and playing the victim of a spiritual attack, would win him sympathy points from the local authorities and his family. They both severely underestimated how much the landscape has changed. They thought they could get away with it again. They thought the old methods of sweeping dirt under the rug still worked. They were wrong. The silence didn't starve the media. It created a vacuum that was immediately filled by the one person Jim Bob never thought would betray him: Aunt Deanna. Deanna Duggar has always been a wild card in the family dynamic. As Jim Bob's sister, she knows exactly where every single skeleton is buried. She grew up with him. She knows his tactics. And she has watched her brother trade his family's soul for television fame and real estate wealth for decades. Deanna stood by during the first wave of scandals, perhaps hoping things would eventually change, or perhaps blinded by her own deeply ingrained family loyalty. But something about this new situation with Joseph has reportedly pushed her completely past the breaking point. According to exclusive insider leaks, Deanna bypassed Jim Bob entirely. She didn't go to the church elders. She didn't call a closed-door family meeting to hash it out in secret. She allegedly went straight to the secular press, reaching out to major outlets like Page Six to send a desperate, highly public message directly to Kendra. The theory is that Deanna knows exactly what happens to women behind the closed doors of the Duggar compound when the cameras stop rolling and the public looks away. She knows how the family machinery works to slowly break a woman's spirit until she accepts the unacceptable as her cross to bear. Deanna's reported demand for Kendra to divorce Joseph is not just about ending a single toxic marriage. It is a full-blown, undeniable declaration of war against Jim Bob's patriarchal authority. By publicly uttering the word divorce, Deanna has committed the ultimate heresy in the IBLP world. She has validated to the entire world that Joseph's alleged actions are so vile, so far beyond the pale of redemption, that the sacred covenant of marriage is null and void. She is publicly throwing a life raft to a drowning woman while actively torpedoing her own brother's multi-million-dollar brand. The irony is absolutely dripping from every angle of this situation. The family that made millions preaching that divorce is never an option is now watching one of their own senior members beg a daughter-in-law to run for her life. The sheer magnitude of Aunt Deanna going to the press to demand a divorce was the exact spark needed to ignite a massive, uncontrollable powder keg within the Duggar family, completely obliterating any remaining facade of unity. For years, the golden rule of the Duggar compound was absolute silence in the face of controversy. You do not speak to the media, you do not post unapproved statements on social media, and you certainly do not turn on your own blood. But according to unprecedented, explosive insider leaks and alleged rumors swirling through deep-dive watchdog forums, the dam has officially broken, and the resulting flood of exposure is apocalyptic for Jim Bob's empire. The catalyst for this internal rebellion reportedly stems from alleged leaked court case details and rumors of devastating audio recordings that are currently circulating behind closed doors. We are hearing exclusive theories that whatever evidence authorities or investigators have allegedly compiled against Joseph is so irrefutable, so fundamentally disturbing, that the siblings can no longer hide behind the excuse of ignorance or blind family loyalty. The psychological conditioning of the Institute in Basic Life Principles relies on the idea that the outside world is evil and the family unit is the only safe haven. But what happens when the absolute worst evils are proven to be sitting right next to you in the church pew? You break rank. And that is exactly what the Duggar siblings are allegedly doing right now in real time. In a move that sent absolute shockwaves across the internet, Jason Duggar reportedly took to Instagram in a highly emotional, unscripted moment of pure rage. According to reports, Jason essentially went rogue, allegedly posting a cryptic but damning message that directly referenced the situation, reportedly going so far as to call Joseph's actions evil before the post was hastily scrubbed from the internet, likely at the frantic behest of Jim Bob's legal team. But the internet is forever, and Jason's alleged rebellion was the signal flare the other siblings needed to finally speak their truth. Joanna, who has spent the last year desperately trying to rebrand her family's image into a wholesome, relatable vlogging channel, is reportedly completely devastated. Insider theories claim she has been breaking down behind the scenes, telling close friends that she is an absolute wreck over the news. For Joanna, who has already survived unimaginable trauma within that household, To see another brother allegedly fall down a dark, catastrophic path is a psychological blow that cannot be overstated. She is reportedly refusing to participate in any family damage control, pulling away from her parents and completely isolating her own children from the Duggar compound. And then there is Jill. Jill Dillard, the original whistleblower, the daughter who walked through the fire to expose the systemic abuse of the IBLP, did not stay silent. According to exclusive insider theories, Jill's team immediately went to work, releasing a powerful, unequivocal statement fiercely condemning abuse in all its forms. While carefully worded to protect herself legally, the underlying message was a direct, lethal strike at the heart of Jim Bob's empire. Jill's statement reportedly emphasized that true justice requires absolute transparency, and that protecting abusers under the guise of religious forgiveness is a profound sin. The media landscape is now entirely flooded with the unprecedented spectacle of Duggars openly turning on their own. The airtight PR fortress that Jim Bob spent 30 years and millions of dollars building has been breached by his own children, and they are burning it to the ground from the inside out. The scramble happening right now in the big house in Tontitown is reportedly unlike anything anyone has ever seen. We are talking about pure, unadulterated panic. When the first major scandal broke years ago, Jim Bob had a playbook. He had Megyn Kelly on speed dial, he had high-powered crisis management teams, and he had a highly indoctrinated family ready to stand in a line and smile for the cameras. But today, the playbook is entirely useless. According to wild insider reports, Jim Bob's war room is currently a scene of absolute chaos. He is allegedly frantically trying to wrangle the remaining loyalists, sons like Jedediah and strict IBLP allies like Paul Caldwell, to launch a massive, coordinated damage control campaign. The strategy, as it has always been, is to weaponize their religion. Exclusive theories suggest they are attempting to desperately push a narrative of spiritual warfare, aggressively demanding that their followers pray for the family as they endure what they are framing as a targeted, demonic attack by the secular media and bitter, fallen family members. They are reportedly trying to spin the narrative that Joseph is simply a flawed man undergoing a harsh spiritual test, and that any talk of legal trouble or divorce is the work of the devil trying to destroy a godly covenant marriage. They are deploying every single manipulation tactic in the IBLP handbook to try and force the narrative back under their control, leaning heavily on the deeply ingrained patriarchal belief that a wife's only duty is to suffer in silence and pray for her husband's redemption. But this desperate scramble for damage control is hitting a massive, impenetrable brick wall, and her name is Aunt Deanna. Just as the IBLP loyalists started whispering their demands for prayer and submission, Deanna went completely scorched earth, doubling down on her public crusade to save Kendra. Deanna is not just breaking the cardinal rule of silence, she is actively mocking the entire Duggar crisis management strategy. She knows that every single time the family asks for prayers during a scandal, it is code for a massive, sinister cover-up. According to explosive insider reports, Deanna did not just stop at demanding a divorce. She reportedly issued a direct, blistering ultimatum to the press, aimed squarely at Jim Bob and the remaining enablers in the family. She allegedly told reporters, "Wake up and repent of your pride." Those 7 words are the most devastating blow Jim Bob has ever received, because they completely strip away his religious armor. Deanna is not attacking him with secular logic. She is using their own theological language to expose his absolute moral bankruptcy. By accusing Jim Bob of pride, one of the deadliest sins in their religion, Deanna is publicly declaring that his desperate attempts to cover up Joseph's alleged crimes are not motivated by faith or love or biblical forgiveness. They are motivated by pure, unadulterated, narcissistic pride. Jim Bob cares more about his public image, his lingering authority, and his deeply flawed legacy than he does about the safety of his daughter-in-law or the souls of his children. This brutal, public betrayal by Deanna has resulted in the total and complete isolation of Joseph Duggar. Think about how staggering that is. This is a family that famously rallied around a known, convicted predator, pouring hundreds of thousands of dollars into legal defense funds and writing letters to federal judges begging for leniency. Yet, according to these exclusive theories, Joseph is currently finding himself completely abandoned. Deanna's public outcry, combined with the visceral, very public disgust of his siblings like Jason, Jill, and Joanna, has turned Joseph into a radioactive pariah. He has become an outcast within a family of literal outcasts. Reports suggest that even Jim Bob, in his frantic scramble to save whatever microscopic shred of the Duggar name remains, is allegedly considering cutting Joseph completely loose to save the rest of the brand. This is the ultimate, horrifying irony of the situation. Joseph spent his entire life molding himself into the perfect IBLP soldier. He never questioned his father, he never rebelled, he smiled on cue, and he married exactly who he was told to marry. He followed every single rule of the oppressive cult to be the perfect, obedient son. But the moment his alleged, indefensible actions threatened to finally sink the ship once and for all, his deeply indoctrinated family chose public PR survival over him. The realization that he is totally alone, cast out by the very system he devoted his life to upholding, is a staggering testament to the cold, calculated, and ultimately hollow nature of the Duggar family empire. This ultimate, horrifying irony is exactly what makes this specific Duggar family meltdown the most catastrophic event in the history of reality television, completely eclipsing everything that came before it. You have to truly understand the psychological profile of Joseph Duggar to grasp the absolute tragedy and profound hypocrisy of this moment. For his entire life, Joseph was the poster boy for the Institute in Basic Life Principles compliance. He was not the rebellious one. He was not the one sneaking away to listen to secular music or secretly downloading social media apps on a hidden phone. From the moment he could walk, Joseph was systematically molded into the perfect, unthinking, unquestioning IBLP drone. He was shipped off to the Alert Academy, the notorious, military-style disciplinary camp designed by the cult to break the spirits of young men and rebuild them into perfectly submissive soldiers for the patriarchal cause. He returned from that camp completely hollowed out and perfectly aligned with Jim Bob's grand vision. While his older brother was secretly tearing the family apart from the inside with horrific, unspeakable crimes, Joseph was quietly sweeping the floors of the used car lot, keeping his head down and doing exactly what he was told. He courted Kendra Caldwell with a sickening level of rigid, robotic precision, never once deviating from the chaperone-enforced rulebook. He asked his father for permission to hold her hand. He asked his father for permission to propose. He allowed his father to negotiate the terms of his entire existence. Joseph traded his autonomy, his critical thinking skills, and his very soul for the promise that if he just followed the rules, he would be protected by the mighty Duggar fortress forever. The cult promised him that obedience equaled invincibility. But the moment his own alleged indefensible actions were brought to the light, that promise evaporated into thin air. The system did not protect him. The system immediately calculated his liability and threw him directly to the wolves. According to wild insider theories currently ripping through the Duggar watchdog community, Jim Bob's ultimate betrayal of Joseph is not an accident. It is a cold, calculated, Machiavellian business decision. Jim Bob Duggar is a man who operates an empire built on public perception and real estate leverage. And right now, his balance sheet is bleeding out. He already spent millions of dollars and every last ounce of his political and social capital trying to save his eldest son. A gamble that ended in complete and total humiliation on a global stage. He simply does not have the resources, the public goodwill, or the energy to mount a second massive cover-up. Especially not in a post-documentary world where millions of people are acutely aware of how the IBLP operates. So, when these new, devastating allegations surrounding Joseph allegedly surfaced, Jim Bob was faced with a horrifying choice: burn down the remaining microscopic ashes of his legacy to save a compliant son, or amputate the infected limb to try and save the host body. Exclusive rumors suggest that Jim Bob has chosen amputation. He is allegedly withdrawing all financial and legal support from Joseph, essentially leaving him to face the wrath of the justice system and the media entirely on his own. This exposes the darkest, most terrifying truth about the Duggar family dynamic. Jim Bob's love, His protection and his fatherhood are strictly conditional. They are entirely dependent on your ability to generate positive PR and financial revenue for the compound. The second you become a liability that cannot be spun into a redemption narrative for a TLC special, you are discarded. Joseph played the game perfectly for almost 30 years, and his grand reward is total, absolute abandonment by the very man who orchestrated his entire life. But the tragedy of Joseph's isolation pales in comparison to the psychological warfare currently being waged over Kendra Caldwell. Kendra is the collateral damage in this massive unfolding disaster, and her fate hangs entirely in the balance of a brutal tug-of-war between two warring factions. On one side, you have the deeply entrenched, toxic alliance of Joseph Duggar and Pastor Paul Caldwell. According to explosive insider leaks, these two patriarchs are allegedly working overtime to keep Kendra trapped inside the compound's psychological prison. They are reportedly utilizing every single tool of spiritual manipulation at their disposal, telling her that if she listens to the secular media, or worse, if she listens to Aunt Deanna, she will be inviting literal demons into her home. They are weaponizing her children against her, allegedly suggesting that a broken home is a worse sin than whatever Joseph has reportedly done. In the IBLP, a woman's suffering is viewed as a crucible meant to purify her soul. Kendra is being told that her pain is a gift from God, an opportunity to demonstrate supreme Christ-like submission. The pressure on her to simply smile, stay silent, and endure the unendurable is reportedly suffocating her. Theories suggest she is practically a ghost walking the grounds of Town, paralyzed by a lifetime of conditioning that taught her she has zero value outside of her husband's authority. But then, on the other side of this battlefield, stands Aunt Deanna Duggar, wielding a megaphone that Jim Bob cannot unplug. Deanna's unprecedented decision to go to the press and demand that Kendra divorce Joseph is the only lifeline this young woman has ever been thrown into in her entire life. Deanna represents the ultimate existential threat to the Caldwell-Duggar alliance because she is speaking from inside the house. She is not a secular critic. She is not a random internet troll. She is a Duggar elder who knows the scripture, knows the family history, and knows exactly how Jim Bob uses religion to cover up absolute evil. When Deanna publicly told Jim Bob to wake up and repent of your pride, she effectively neutralized his spiritual authority. She gave Kendra the one thing Jim Bob has spent decades trying to destroy: permission. Deanna is publicly giving Kendra the theological and moral permission to pack her bags, take her children, and run for her life. This is completely uncharted territory for a Duggar wife. Anna Duggar never had an Aunt Deanna. Anna had a mother-in-law in Michelle who allegedly told her to fast and pray the bad thoughts away. Anna was completely surrounded by enablers. But Kendra has a very loud, very angry, very public advocate who is entirely unafraid of Jim Bob's retaliation. The ramifications of Deanna's rebellion are sending shockwaves far beyond just Joseph and Kendra. It is fundamentally destroying the entire sociological structure of the Duggar universe. Think about the remaining siblings who are still clinging to the edges of the compound. You have the lost boys, the younger sisters, and the various spouses who have been silently watching this civil war unfold. Deanna's actions are reportedly emboldening a silent majority within the extended family. If Jim Bob's own sister can publicly demand a divorce and survive the social fallout, what is stopping the rest of them from speaking their truth? According to deep dive exclusive theories, Deanna's public defiance is exactly what pushed Jason to make his alleged Instagram post calling Joseph evil. It is exactly what gave Joanna the courage to completely isolate herself and tell friends she is a wreck. Deanna shattered the illusion of Jim Bob's omnipotence. For decades, the family lived under the terrifying assumption that if you crossed Jim Bob, you would be cut off from your family, your finances, and your God. But Deanna is proving that you can cross Jim Bob, expose the rot, and still maintain your moral high ground. She is dismantling the cult of personality that kept the 19 kids and counting empire running. This brings us to the ultimate lingering question that has the entire internet completely divided. And it is a question that cuts right to the absolute core of the Duggar family's terrifying PR machinery. As we watch this spectacular, unprecedented collapse, with Deanna going rogue, Jason allegedly turning on his brother, Jill releasing legal statements, and Joseph being left completely isolated to face his alleged crimes, we have to look at the man pulling the strings. Jim Bob Duggar has never, ever let a crisis go to waste, and he has never allowed a narrative to completely escape his control without a fight. So we have to ask ourselves, is this chaotic, public family meltdown actually a genuine, organic rebellion? Or is it the most sinister, calculated PR move Jim Bob has ever orchestrated? There is a massive, growing theory circulating among the most hardcore Duggar watchdogs that Jim Bob is secretly orchestrating this entire splintering effect. The theory suggests that Jim Bob knows the Duggar brand is completely toxic, and that the only way to save the younger children's marketability and his own financial future is to manufacture a controlled burn. Could Jim Bob be quietly allowing or even encouraging Deanna and the siblings to publicly execute Joseph in the media? By letting the family publicly turn on Joseph, Jim Bob creates the illusion that the family has finally changed. It makes it look like they are finally holding abusers accountable. It paints the remaining Duggars as victims of Joseph's deception, rather than complicit enablers of a corrupt system. If the public believes that the Duggars are now taking a hard stance against abuse and are willing to cast out their own sons, it might just buy Jim Bob enough goodwill to eventually pitch a new, rebranded television show centered around the healing and accountability of the younger generation. Under this terrifying theory, Joseph is just the sacrificial lamb placed on the altar of Jim Bob's unending greed, and Aunt Deanna, whether she realizes it or not, is simply playing a role in Jim Bob's masterclass of public manipulation. Or is the truth much simpler and far more devastating for the patriarch? Is Jim Bob currently sitting in a locked room in the big house, completely stripped of his power, furiously watching his empire burn to the ground, entirely unable to stop the inferno? Is he experiencing genuine, absolute terror as he realizes that his sister, his children, and the public have finally seen right through his decades of religious gaslighting? Has Aunt Deanna actually achieved the impossible by breaking the Duggar curse and finally ending the cycle of generational trauma, forcing a completely unscripted, highly destructive reckoning that will end with Kendra packing her bags and Jim Bob facing total financial and social ruin? This is where we need to hear from you. The layers of deception, trauma, and manipulation in this family are so deep that the truth is almost impossible to untangle. Do you think Jim Bob is absolutely furious at Deanna and the siblings for speaking out and breaking the cardinal rule of silence? Or do you believe the darker, exclusive theory that Jim Bob is secretly orchestrating this entire public execution of Joseph to save the Duggar name and his own wallet? Will Kendra actually listen to Deanna and do the unthinkable by filing for divorce? Or will the Caldwell-Duggar brainwashing keep her trapped in that compound forever? Drop your most brutally honest thoughts, theories, and predictions in the comment section down below right now. We are reading every single one of them. If your mind is completely blown by this massive Duggar family meltdown, you need to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an update. The fortress has officially fallen. The secrets are all spilling out, and we will be right here to cover every single second of the fallout. Stay tuned.